Mount Whitney stands in the middle of the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains at 14,505 feet. It's the tallest peak in the continental United States, and because it's there, I guess, it's a challenge and a thrill to go there any way you can. I hiked to its summit when I was 17 years old. It's not an easy hike, but now I go back in my glider whenever I can. This is a film about that adventure. But in order to fly to Mount Whitney, I have to travel a long road across the high desert to the hot, sleepy community of Inyokern. The road meanders through endless flats of hills and endless dry sage. It sounds tedious, but it can be beautiful and peaceful, as it was on my journey this time. And so, after crossing the desert, I arrive at the Inyokern airport in the late afternoon, and slowly the sun drops down behind the Sierra Ridge. Dusk surrounds everything and announces the coming of the night. It's time to settle in. It's not long after the sun goes down that a beautiful moon arises to keep me company for the night. All is quiet at the airport now. The moon is so bright shadows can even be seen, and the only activity seems to be rabbits and coyotes sneaking through the sagebrush looking for water and food. It's morning now, and one of the first things I see as the sun begins to heat the desert is a little visitor. He's looking around and seems to be saying, "What are you doing here invading my space?" And then, not long after, I see this little fella pop out from behind a bush, and he's after my first little visitor. I'm not sure what happened in the chase, but I know it's time for me to get busy and get my glider ready before it gets too hot. The sun, even though it is early, begins to bake my friends and I as we assemble our gliders. But the day looks promising, and everyone is anticipating good flights today. My glider is now assembled and ready to go. This task only takes about an hour, so I have plenty of time to get myself ready and to relax in the shade as the day gets hotter. It's getting closer to takeoff time now, so I push my glider down to the staging area. Yes, that's me with a funny but effective sun shielding hat. Just before noon, the glider towing operations start. The day's ready. It's time to go. I'm on tow now. It seems that the air is a bit rougher than usual, and so it's difficult to maintain the proper tow position relative to the tow plane. Just a bit more of a challenge to start the day. After towing up about 3,000 feet higher than the airport, I found a thermal on a ridge off Owens Peak. This thermal is off a steep spine here, close to the peak. I'll work the thermal as long as possible to get as high as possible, and then use that altitude to work north along the Sierra Ridge. Of course, the eagle and the hawk find these rising air currents effortlessly. My job now is to try and emulate these great birds in their use of the rising air. I'm fortunate to have instruments in my glider that help me do this. But when I happen to see a soaring bird, I am reminded that they are the real masters of the air. On this day, I am just a lucky visitor in their beautiful world. This thermal tops out near the summit of Owens Peak, so I'll break it off now and I'll head north looking for more rising air to boost me higher and higher. For the first few miles, I've had to catch air coming up the steep canyons from the edge of the desert below. Lots of circling here at the start. At this point, I've struggled a bit over the last 45 minutes to get the altitude I need to move north. I've been on the eastern Sierra Spine, just ridge hopping for the first 30 miles. Finally, I connected with a strong thermal, and now I'm about 13,000 feet, and I've moved more to the west and I'm flying directly towards Mount Whitney on the horizon. Even though I have good altitude now, there's still more circling and climbing to be done before I get to Mount Whitney. Whitney's getting closer now, and the thermal tops are at least 15,000 up here. Whitney's coming up here just in the left foreground, the peak at the back of those little sawtooth peaks. And my intent is to do a couple flybys here. That's the stone shack at the top of Mount Whitney, and there are a couple of hikers there now. As I pass over Whitney now, I am somehow reminded of the poem High Flight as spoken by my good friend Art Wallace.
Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter silver wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling earth of sunsplit clouds, and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence, hovering there. I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air, up the long, delirious burning blue. I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace where never lark or even eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind, I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God.
Heading south now after that last pass, and it's been a good run. Basically all I have to do is follow this ridge on the left and move out on the desert, and I'm home. Everything looks good. I should be there in a bit. For me now, the day is almost done. It's been a good run south on the Sierra Crest, just cruising mostly. So now I'll pull out onto the desert floor near Inyo Kern in preparation for a landing. Winds are light, which is always good. I'll need to execute a good approach and landing, taking into account any other airport traffic. After I'm down, I'll spend the late afternoon and evening rehydrating, relaxing, and sharing the day's activities with a few other fellow pilots. And so now the morning has come, and I've packed up and I'm heading south across the desert on the long road home. Again, it's peaceful and enjoyable early in the morning before the heat takes charge, so it's not a bad drive. This flight to Mount Whitney has not been a long flight. It's only a round trip of about 140 miles, and that's not especially far when you have a high-performance glider. But this is one of my favorite flights. It's just always good to go back to Mount Whitney.